So, hi everyone. Today we're here with Godwin Chan, the incumbent Ward 6 councillor who is running for local and regional councillor here in Richmond Hill. So, just to start us off, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've accomplished so far on council?
Thank you. My name is Godwin Chan. I live in Richmond Hill almost 30 years. For the last 16 years, including now, I'm serving as a Ward 6 councillor. It's quite a privilege to be a councillor, and I'm very proud in terms of at least three things I can share. Number one, back 16 years ago, when I was advocating and champion for young subway extension of Richmond Hill, that wasn't a time that many people say, yeah, go for it. In fact, people are saying, forget about dreaming. But now it's not if it's coming, it's when it's coming. Number two, when I am serving, I'm still serving as the David Dunlop Observatory Park Steering Committee Chair. I moved back in 2017 to urge Richmond Hill to apply for recognition from federal government as a National Historic Site for the DDO, in short. And I'm happy to say in June of this year that Parks Canada Park to declare or designate the DDO as a Canada's National Historic Site right in Richmond Hill was unveiled. Number three, I've been working hard to actually promote parks improvement, and particularly in Ward 6, we have the city's first indoor running or walking tracks. So for all seasons, particularly good for seniors. Actually, then they can go particularly during the cold time and winter time. And also outdoor exercise equipment, including 2 table tennis stations. And talking about seniors earlier, I championed for the age-friendly community strategy, which is to assist or facilitate seniors' active living. And I'm proud that Council adopted that, and we are moving on. Hopefully in the next term, we'll implement information measures, including having an advisory council engaging senior members. I would wrap up maybe by saying that before we adopt a new noise bylaw, and I have advocating for modernizing our noise bylaw. And believe it or not, in the past, the bylaw doesn't really give you any objective measurement. So to you, subjective, it may be noisy, but to someone else, noisy. So I'm glad that I advocate for now we have a modernized noise bylaw so that noise level is not subject to subjective assessment, but measured by objective instrument. So I think that shows that I do have a track record of getting things done, and I'm presenting myself now as the regional and local councillor candidate.
Thank you. So that brings us on to our next question, which is about the financial health of the city. So as a municipality, the financial health is a very important part for the city's operation. So what would you do and what have you been doing as councillor to ensure that Richmond Hill is on good financial grounds, while at the same time providing the same or improved services?
All right. To put it very simply, is one aspect is revenue. The other aspect is expenses. So if talking about expenses, one idea to ensure the financial, I would say, really in a sustainable way for the municipality to run is to look at the expenses very carefully. Not only we're providing value for residents and business taxes, but really assessing the efficiency and performances at all times. And I have to say, in the past, I have been a champion advocating for internal audit, which is an additional way to ensuring all those checks and balances are there, to money are spent properly. And I'm happy to say that having been a member of a 3-member audit committee for the last 16 years, City of Richmond does have an internal audit program. And I could see moving forward, we could actually introduce more digital tools to improve the efficiency in delivering programs and services, and that would help over a longer run, saving more money. So that's expense side I'm talking about. Now move on to revenue, right? How do you expand the pie in terms of getting more revenue coming in? Richmond Hill is at this point in time heavily relying on the residential property taxes. My view is to also, as the chair of the city's economic development committee, is to really attract more investment into Richmond Hill, so that in terms of the revenue coming in, there'll be more coming from businesses. If you have more businesses settled in Richmond Hill, not only to pay their share of business taxes, which is part of the revenue picture. Secondly, they will create local jobs as well. That would also shift the balance that the over-reliance on the revenue side for municipality in Richmond Hill on the residential folks' shoulders, and shift it over the long run, that are more balanced in a way. So what I've been doing is that maintaining financial health is to embarking on, as the chair of economic development, attracting not just multinational businesses for all sizes to come to Richmond Hill, and I'm happy to say have been successful working with the former late mayor in attracting Amazon, for example, to come to Richmond Hill, creating 400 local jobs, but also other supermarkets that I personally involved in getting to Richmond Hill, and also a foreign-based bank. Those are really help to promote financial viability. And as the saying goes, success breeds success. So my objective is to maintain the financial health is not only looking at the expense side, how we can do same or more with less or the same, but expand the revenue that by attracting more investments. And in fact, I'm proud that as the chair of Economic Development Committee, that recommend Council this term to adopt the investments attraction strategy. And we've re-elected or elected to the Regional and Local Councillor. I would like to work with council colleagues and staff and diverse parties to make Richmond Hill is truly a place for a lot of investment to come.
Thank you. So our next question has something to do with urban development. So right now, the lack of housing is indeed an extremely important problem that is Richmond Hill faces. So on the other hand, density and adequate services are also a concern shared by many. So what is your philosophy on how City Council should approach this problem and balance these two issues?
Yes, Richmond Hill, in fact, well, not just Richmond Hill. In fact, housing affordability has been declared as a crisis in your region. And a lot of the particularly younger people like yourself, I find that it's very challenging to enter the housing markets. So one aspect is that in balancing, on one hand, the provincial mandate to us is the intensification, meaning increase, expanding, keep going. On the other hand, that is make the also challenge in making the housing particular prices more affordable to a more diverse range of people, as well as to maintain the integrity of the environment. So how do we do that? Now, one aspect is that well, first of all, Richmond Hill, this term of council, we have adopted the affordable housing strategy. In fact, we also set up a task force looking into that. So that measures we're looking at, such as looking at what we call inclusionary zoning, which is could be including requiring the development industry to set a certain number of units at a certain, you call it to be more affordable, so to speak, and either in terms of number or percentage. Now, that's one way of doing it. The other way is to look at the different range of housing types, because right now it's almost like ground related would be detached, semi-detached, or townhouses. And then when you go to sort of multi-story, would be condominium apartments. Like we like to look at a full range about within the limited land we have, how we can maximize in terms of land usage while accommodating growth. Because one thing I think that I've been saying for 16 years, any development have to respect the character of the community, which are already there. Now, there's one thing that I mentioned about subway, and I mentioned about subway is coming, and the earliest time they might be get here is by late 2030. So along those major transit routes, where subway or Yonge Street Highway 7, whereas now is all we have this what we call rapid bus transit. Those are the corridor, Yonge corridor, 7 corridor, future subway coming. Those are the places whereby we could really do proper planning to have intensification, such as multi-story towers. And it will be also, in a sense, further distance away from minimizing the impact, particular consider adverse impact by the mature neighborhood. So that's one way of balancing, while increasing diverse range of housing units and types, while also capitalizing, so to speak, on the major transit routes, Yonge Street and subway. And on that note, and I think that's a really important thing to say, this issue that you just mentioned about the question in there is not only to be solved by City of Richmond Hill. It requires working with partners. By that, I mean the federal provincial government, as well, of course, the York region as well, and also the development industry and non-profit sector. So this will have to be something that engaging all stakeholders, so to speak, to addressing the housing supply, affordability issues, and maintaining growth and balancing it in such a way to respect the community character, as well as not having any detrimental effects on the environment.
Thank you so much. So that brings us to our next question, which is about efficient transportation. So an important part of a city is efficient transportation. So what would you, as regional and local councillor, do to improve transportation here in Richmond Hill?
Now, like housing, transportation, I think, have to stay up front. It cannot be just only addressed by the City of Richmond Hill. Think about it. Transportation, by the nature of whether you're driving, you're cycling, you're walking, or taking public transit, you're going from point A to point B. The point A may be in Richmond Hill, the point B may be also Richmond Hill, but it is a likelihood that point A and B maybe go beyond the borders of Richmond Hill. The reason I'm saying that the transportation, in terms of addressing it, is to have to look at a more macro level, along with the adjacent municipalities. Like Richmond Hill does not just, in isolation. As I mentioned earlier on, traffic does move from across boundaries. So looking at that wholesomely from the York region perspective, how to, in terms of the design or really updating, reviewing how the road structure are connecting transportation from east to west, south to north. And I think it's very important. And on that note, one of the aspects I always try to do is that because right now I'm a local councillor, is to really articulate to York region transportation about looking at the traffic signals, whether in fact the timing could be synchronized in such a way that can help a more smooth flow of traffic on major roads. Now, people may not necessarily know that all major roads like Yonge Street, 16th Avenue, Highway 7, Major Mackenzie, Elgin Mills, Leslie, Bathurst, Bayview, even though physically within the City of Richmond Hill, they're not controlled by the transportation staff of Richmond Hill. They're controlled by York region. So that's why it really reinforced what I just said. Richmond Hill have to work in partnership, collaboration with York region, neighboring municipalities to look at how we wholesomely, what I call, look at the transportation demand, look at the transportation travel pattern, whether east-west, and south north. And again, it tying into one aspect is that I know it might not be easy, but we have to keep promoting public transit and other modes of transportation, whether it's cycling, pedestrian, or carpool, and that would help to reduce the congestion on the road. And I mentioned about subway in the past. Imagine when the subway comes, actually it will reduce over 2,000 bus trips and on the Yonge corridor, and that would mean freeing up the spaces, at least on Yonge corridor, for other vehicles to use. And I hope that answers your question. So the bottom line is that we have to look at not just the city level, but in the more macro level, along with the transportation planning and design or redesign with York Region as a whole.
All right, thank you. And as a follow-up to that, you did mention other modes of transportation like cycling and walking. So do you think that there are any things that can be done to improve those modes of transportation?
Yes. And in fact, most of the major roads you can see the Highway 7, for example, and the Viva Bus are having all this bus rapid transit done. There have been designated bike lanes. And actually, you might notice that particular intersections, they're all colored green on the ground. So those are actually the what I call infrastructure provided to make it easier for people to cycle, because you have to have the structure, infrastructure. Otherwise, we're going to ride a bike. Now, one aspect is, unlike other places such as maybe as close as other places in Canada, like Montreal, other places, or Europe, they got to have some kind of physical barriers that really try to help to raise the comfort of the cyclists when they're actually competing, so to speak, or sharing the road along with the vehicles. So in promoting it, cycling use, not only you provide the infrastructure like the cycling path or lanes, but you have to really do other aspects to help complement or raise the level of the cyclists to do it. So you might notice in actually Richmond Hill and York Region that usually would have a sign on the road to say share the road. That is primarily to remind more of the drivers, hey, there's maybe somebody next to you, doing cycling. That's one aspect. The other thing too is that I think not just Richmond Hill, municipalities in general in this part of the world would have to gear towards how are we going to plan for and adapt to the increasing, apparently, use of scooters, particularly e-scooters. Now, right now is kind of not much way of managing it because it's relatively new. But I can see that coming, that from the other modes of transportation, I have actually seen people just get onto the e-scooters, but then what are the rules? And it has to be thinking about the safety for all. So that's very important. And also for pedestrians, particularly when crossing major roads like Highway 7 Yonge, I think the improvement in terms of how the signals are being triggered, the timing for cross walk are very important. And there's also technology can be used to try to really help with when crosswalks, when buttons were being touched or whatever, it helped to have means to really alert the drivers. Watch, there are people going to cross the roadway. I hope I answered your question, particularly cyclists on the major roads. One aspect may be more recreational, something I believe in, and we already have been doing it, that we could develop something like a trail going east-west or south-north for pedestrians as well as the cyclists. In some way, along Leslie Street, there's already one, not just Richmond Hill. The plan is called Lake to Lake, from Lake Simcoe to Lake Ontario. Actually, if in a portion of Richmond Hill, you might see, I think on Leslie, on the west side of Leslie, some widened path is meant for that. And as well, we have also a railroad line that runs from the city of Toronto downtown all the way through Richmond Hill. And I can see that's a potential for, and actually in some way it's kind of there, but need to be really developed more maturity, so to speak, like a walking trail, cycling trail. So you can actually, similar to the Lake Simcoe to Lake Ontario route, can go along with the railroad within a safe way of planning, doing similar along the railroad all the way to from York Region and Richmond Hill to City of Toronto through the Don Valley.
Thank you. And you've already previously kind of touched upon this, but an important part of a livable community is community safety. How will you, as a councillor, maintain and improve community safety in Richmond Hill?
If I hear correctly, the question is about community safety, correct? Yes?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
good. Okay, because, okay, we touch on transportation, road safety, and community safety, of course. We all want to have the community safe. And it's very important that one of the aspects is how do we develop a good working relationship from a municipal level, from a residential neighborhood with police, who are actually helping us to keep peace in the community. And I have been working with the York Regional Police and help facilitate with community groups to form the program called Neighborhood Watch. You might have heard about Neighborhood Watch, which we did neighbors helping neighbors watching. And that's really by, in one way, help to foster the community spirit, but also that help to, in a way, to deter crime, because people are watching over each other. So over the years, I have helped facilitate at least about 7 to 8 neighborhood watch groups, which I found that it's they have a captain and also liaise with the police community officer, as well that keeping the exchange of information where there may be incidents of certain types in certain area. They're more, how I put it, more timely kind of information exchange. So to help the community to really, from a crime prevention standpoint, as well as to really improve the communication with the police and the community. And I endeavor to continue to do that. And my plan actually is that at least in the next 4 years to establish a really system whereby if elected as a regional local councillor, would meet monthly with the superintendent in charge of the overall policing in Richmond Hill, also ensuring and requesting that the increased frequency of the police patrol. And in fact, I had a meeting already with superintendent. They say they're thinking of putting more officers on foot. Obviously, that's all only when the weather is nice. Like for example, using cops on bikes during the summertime, but also at other times, it's increasing the frequency of patrolling of the police cruisers that would help to deter crime. So that's community safety. And also, even 20 years ago, before you become a councillor, I was a founding member of this program called Road Watch. And I'm proud to say that that was to also enhance the safety in the community, because like, you know, getting more people to stop where the stop sign is. So it's also helped to enhance the safety within the community, because one accident is too many. And so from a public safety standpoint, is increase public police visibility to improve the dialogue of community policing with all stakeholders. And one aspect I feel very strongly is that, and I talked to the police superintendent, I intend, if elected as a regional local councillor, to push very hard, is to diversify the membership of the police district, have this what they call liaison committee, to be more inclusive, have membership from our different neighborhoods, different background, so that it can truly be an effective, I would say, ally of the police and the municipalities to help providing two-way or even multi-way communication to get our community more engaged and safer. And my objective in the campaign is actually to make Richmond Hill community safer and stronger. So community safety is certainly top in my mind.
All right, thank you for that answer. And going on to our next question, which is about services. So obviously the city of Richmond Hill provides a lot of services to residents. So what do you think going forward are some services you might think of adding to the city, or some services that you think might need improvement?
Yes, there are always things, room for improvement, no doubt about that. And I think that's important, that City of Richmond has been doing a community survey. In the past, it's every 5 years, because it helped to set the priorities, because this is what the community wants based on the survey. At the end of the day, all the program services are meant to serve the businesses and residents of Richmond Hill. So one of the aspects I see is that this term of council already including the snow window removal program. I would like to see that have improvement in that, in terms particular of the turnaround time, because it has to be more, I guess, be responsive in terms of time. If people have to wait a few hours after a snowfall to get the window to be removed, even though it's free, but in the meantime, they need help to get out of the driveway, right? So I see the improvement. It's great we have that now, a free service to residents of snow window removal, which is the snow bank, some people call it, near the curb. I like to see the improvement in terms of the turnaround time, response time, and make it really more helpful to people when they need it. Number two, I also like to see in terms of our recreational programs to also reflect and also based on input on the survey and residents' views expressed to us that reflect the evolving kind of preference on the kind of recreational sports. Something that I, for one, learned, and I think council learned as well. Pickleball is something that really popular. That might not be the case 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So we have to, as a city, as a council, we have to go with changing time, so to speak, looking at how are we allocate resources. Are we doing more certain particular facility? How's the adapting? It's no point of building a certain recreational facility for a certain kind of sports that perhaps then have less resources to accommodate, like for example, the more popular pickleball. So the good part is that this term of council, we have adopted a parks plan, a recreation plan that is to look at, for example, like talking about improvement, building for a, let's say, sports facility, which is aiming for indoor. It should be multi-sports. So you don't necessarily tie down to one particular type. For example, I'm not a tennis player, but the way I understand it, when you have the lines drawn for the tennis courts, but also you could have the lines drawn for the pickleball courts, badminton courts, and so within one court facility, particularly indoor, and depending on the demand and the timing, it could be used as a tennis court, it could be used as a pickleball court and badminton court, and depending on how you schedule things. So those are, we have to be more creative and think outside the box to accommodate. The other thing too is I mentioned about that I have championed for more outdoors equipment for exercise and all that. I like to see that to be further expanded and improved upon, because we have a relatively long winter season in Canada, not just in Richmond Hill. And it's good to have outdoor to the extent that equipment that people for all ages can use. And I indicated I have championed for the age-friendly community. And the services I'd like to see in the coming term is to really looking at in terms of planning, designing programs that really have to be for people for all ages, from young age all the way to quote unquote senior or adult living ages. So those are the areas I'm thinking of. The other thing I'd like to improve, and partly relating to community safety, which the question before that, I like to bring back, which we used to have what we call Parks Ambassador Program. This is a program that volunteers and residents can get training from police, and they would be basically like quote unquote ambassadors in the parks to help residents who might have issues, questions, and that also enhance the comfort level and hopefully raise the safety level in terms of use of parks. So those are the kind of things I'd like to see improve and expand on.
Thank you. And that brings us to our next question, which is about green space and public parks, which is an important part of livable communities, such as Richmond Hill. So how will you, as councillor, maintain and improve the state of green spaces in Richmond Hill and improve the environment that we have?
Interesting. I talked about parks before your question. Yes, it's the green spaces, trails, parks, certainly very important. Particularly during the pandemic, we're still in the pandemic, more than ever. I, for one, I can say, and I think probably most people would say, most people, particularly during the really early part of the pandemic, have to stay at home. The safer place to go is to go outside to the public parks and to get some fresh air. So it's very important. As I mentioned, this term of council already passed a parks plan. I will endeavor to ensuring all those action plans that we have stated in the parks plan be implemented over the time. Some of them actually need lots of money. And I give you a very specific example as a chair of the David Dunlop Observatory Park Steering Committee. And this is one place whereby we have almost 111 acres of green spaces with infrastructure or with buildings such as observatory buildings, and currently also part of it is the arena. To really to be developed in such a situation is good for outdoor walking trail, which already we have built a 2.25 kilometer new trail path in the DDO park. And these are additional things that we are planting, that the trees in there. In fact, animals used to roam around in the DDO park like deers, wherever they are back already. So I think it's important. We have a plan, parks plan. We stick with it, we expand on it, and also look for the additional potential resources funding from federal provincial government to help. And I give another specific example on the DDO park. For example, when we do the trail, and I mentioned 2.25 kilometer, that's we come from our own funds in the capital funds. But when we are going to do more, that is something we could look for opportunity to get funding from the provincial federal government to help further green the parks and spaces. And in fact, during 2013 to 2020, I have the privilege to be elected by Alderman as a councillor to the National Board of Directors of Federation of Municipalities. And within this, in short, called FCM, runs a what we call Green Municipal Fund. And I look forward to be elected and coming back to the next term of council to actively looking for those funding from Green Municipal Fund like the FCM and other, as I mentioned early on, and maybe also looking at partnership with non-profit group And for example, in Richmond Hill, the Swan Lake, I know you heard about the Swan Lake, and actually it was actually as donated by a well-to-do family in partnership with Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, other municipalities, meaning City of Toronto, believe it or not, they chip in money as well. So there are all these opportunities to think beyond the borders of Richmond Hill, because when it comes to green space, when it comes to good for the environment, we can actually look at and engage all interested minded parties.
All right, thank you for that. So our next question has to do with our councillor. So how would you navigate the relationship between Richmond Hill and York Region and ensure that our interests are represented?
Very good question. And in fact, I am in a sense fortunate that I already have served in the York Regional Council for almost a year in the acting capacity, when the former late mayor was taking his medical leave of absence. And actually, I have been on the York Regional Council. So I did gain the familiarity with issues, not necessarily at York Regional Council. I mean, not really being deliberate or touch on at the Richmond Hill Council. And I give you the concrete examples: public safety, community safety, we talked about earlier, policing, ambulance service. Those are all York Region. They're not discussed at the Richmond Hill Council level. Public health, we still have pandemic, and talking about, I remember every week we have meeting with the York Regional Medical Officer Health to understand and to get the latest information about what's happening. And public transportation, I talked so much about Yonge Subway Extension early on, but it's actually a York Region project. It's not a Richmond Hill project or any municipal project. And housing, I touch on, is housing is actually a mandate under York Region, but of course it impacts on all municipalities. And social services, dealing with homelessness, dealing with the mental health. Those are the, I would say, issues that been dealt by York Region and not at the local level. So for those issues that I would say they're quite distinct and different. And I've, as a representative from Richmond Hill, of course, is ensuring during the resources allocation budget times, both what we call operating budget and capital, to ensuring, advocating the interests of Richmond Hill in terms of getting, quote unquote, a fair share of those resource allocation, whether it's for the public safety like policing, ambulance coverage, public health, and public transportation, social, and other services. And of course, housing is a kind of like collaborative thing. And I have to say, for about a year experience on York Regional Council, I have established a good relationship, working relationship, a very respectful relationship with the other members of York Regional Council as well as staff. So based on my experience, I don't see any conflict per se. Is actually because of, I mentioned, the distinct level of responsibility on different issues. The issue talked about advocating for the interests of Richmond Hill is ensuring we have the fair share of the resources allocated to us. And I hope that answers your question. And in some way, at the York Regional level, one has to think about is not just for your own municipality, also to think about for 9 municipalities are serving 1.2 million people. So it is a dual role in that sense. But based on my experience, there haven't been situations really into a what I call direct conflict situation. But certainly from Richmond Hill, I said it the third time, ensuring Richmond Hill's fair share will be allocated in terms of resources.
Thank you. And this brings us to our last question. If you were to be elected, what would be the first issue you would try to address?
One of the first issue is that I really want to finish off the Richmond Hill's official plan. All this talk about urban growth, all this talk about housing, all this talk about transportation, all this talk about where the parks are, have you enough green spaces, all have to cover under this framework called official plan, which is for designating or policy-wise stating where development go to, where the other intended uses of lands are in the city. So it seems to be a big word. Richmond Hill, we start off with the official plan process during this term of council. We already actually make some amendments in terms of neighborhoods, in terms of other aspects. But I think that's important on inclusive. I mentioned about addressing housing issues such as inclusionary zoning kind of thing. Really have to have the whole planning and development process completed. And that touches on the issues I just talked about: housing, transportation, as well as the proper, I would say, helping to enhance environmental sustainability, knowing where the development is going to and what form of development, under what conditions. I hope it helps.
All right, thank you. And just as a follow-up to that, you mentioned, the development of the official plan. So in your mind, do you think that in the process of developing the official plan, there are any specific types of development that you're looking for, like condos, middle-sized housing, single detached housings, those sorts of things? And do you think that there needs to be like areas where different houses are developed, or do you think it's a more mixed approach?
Well, sounds like, Matthew, you must be reading our housing affordable housing strategy. Those are the things that we actually touch on. And this term of council, we look at all those things when we adopt the affordable housing strategy. And this is the thing, that's why I'm talking about. I like to come back and as also a member of Richmond Hill Council, as in the role of Regional and Local Councillor, to look at all those things, because our adopted strategy are already laying out all those things. Now, there have been some issues and concerns, I gather, and you did mention about mid-range housing type, because that would be that will actually have a more impact on mature neighborhood. And I did mention about my approach and philosophy is always respect the character of the community. So those are the things to look at balance. And particularly along the major transportation route, I honestly think those are where the intensification would go to, because that was meant to have people using public transit and don't have to rely on cars. And in terms of actually what we call the parking requirement for some of these multi-story buildings, that need to be revisited, because this is another incentive to have people actually using vehicle. Now, in some places in Ontario, I think most in Ontario, that particularly certain multi-story buildings have initially negotiated certain what I call it, maybe not discount, but a better deal, so to speak, for using public transit, like a pass or something for their residents in the building. I think that those are the kind of things we look at in terms of intensification, where the future subway station is, and along the Yonge Street route and the Highway 7, because that would actually move, part of relating to what I said earlier, help to shift and move people in those multi-story buildings to use public transit. And as well as the benefit is to reduce less cars on the road, so reduce congestion and also good for the environment, less greenhouse gases. And I think it's a win-win scenario, because in planning, we have been trying to strive for what we call 15-minute complete communities, which is to say within those new what we call transit-oriented development or communities, because they're close to major transit, so you can do almost everything within that 15-minute cycling, walking, and without having to drive a car. So this is a kind of the objective that we're striving towards. And the most likely that will happen is around where the public transit is.
All right. Thank you for the interview. That concludes what we have to ask for you today. And thank you for, taking time out of your day to interview us. And yeah, thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I take it the way it goes is that you interview all the candidates and you will broadcast it in the proper channels. And I think that's good. And thank you again for all those insightful questions. And everything will come together if you have a plan, and so that we all can strive towards it and work towards it. And you might see me talking about plan all this time, because without a plan, we never know 5 years from now, have you achieved anything? Well, you have to set out what you want to achieve. Otherwise, how do you know what the targets are and how to achieve it, right? So thank you very much for all your time, interest, and have a good evening. And well, it's a weekend coming up. Have a really happy, healthy Thanksgiving weekend.
You too. All right.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much for joining us today.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.